The Fantastic Four, they're back, and they're better than ever. Well, we'll get to that. Anyway, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be talking about Essential Fantastic Four. I'll be reviewing it. This is Volume 5 here. The cover is the 100 issue cover. Right, because this volume collects issues numbers 84 to 110, as well as annual 7 and 8, but not really, because annuals 7 and 8 were reprints, so basically just 84 through 110. Right, so what's going on here? Well, the original team behind Fantastic Four, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they were working together since 1961 with issue number 1, and so, well, we get to issue number 102 here, about almost 9 years later, and Jack Kirby, he leaves the book, ending their run, one of the longest comic runs of all time. Anyway, so that was concluded. And picking up Jack Kirby's place were artists John Romita Sr. for a couple issues, and then for a while after that, we had John Buscema. Right. Yeah, where should I go with this? I guess I'll go back to the whole breakup, really, because that's like the major theme of the volume. So like I said, initially, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they conversed a lot directly and stuff like that, but by the end here, Jack Kirby, I think he moved to California, and I think Marvel was based out of New York. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby didn't see each other very often. I think they communicated via phone. And by the end, Jack Kirby was very dissatisfied and was looking for employment elsewhere. He had already vowed by this time not to create any new characters, not to contribute any new ideas. He didn't want to. He was pretty unhappy. And how is this all reflected in the volume? Well, to starters, issues number 102, his last one was the first part of a story arc where Namor and Magneto team up. Not ideal, but whatever. But across the board here, this is definitely the lowest point of the Lee Kirby team up. That is to say that things quickly go off the rail. Things quickly went off the rail, I should say. Yeah, the story quality and effort it's a noticeable dip. But yeah, let's talk about some of the story arcs. So the first story arc in here was a 4-issue story arc where Nick Fury essentially hires the Fantastic Four, or commissions them to go investigate Doctor Doom in Latveria, because he has a secret army, and he basically needs them to go collect intelligence and maybe put it down. By the way, the Fantastic Four, if you recall, are Reed Richards, the Thing, the Human Torch, and the beginning here, it's Crystal of the Inhumans. But in the course of the Doctor Doom story arc, the invisible girl, Sue Storm, she comes back, and so she rejoins the team. So there's kind of a 5-man Fantastic Four team. Nevertheless, I won't go into intricate story details if you're worried about spoilers and all that. In any case, then we kind of have like a greatest hits, because if you recall, Fantastic Four number 1, the first villain was Mole Man. Well, the next like 2 issues are about him, and then issue number 2, Fantastic Four, was about the Skrulls, and the next story arc, well, it's about the Skrulls. I will briefly comment or elaborate on this particular Skrull story arc, because it was incredibly bizarre, a little too bizarre for me. So basically, it's like Planet Hulk, but with a Thing. The Skrulls basically kidnap Ben Grimm, and take him to this like fighting planet where he has to fight all these different monsters and aliens. The gimmick doesn't quite end there because the Skrulls are basically LARPing as like Prohibition era mafia mobster guys. That's right. So they don't look like Skrulls the entire book. They look like, mobsters. It's quite bizarre. It might just be because Jack Kirby had a fascination with I guess that era. I don't know. Or maybe he just didn't want to draw a whole bunch of Skrulls. Maybe they all look the same. Hopefully that's not racist. Whatever the case, yeah, it's incredibly bizarre. And then most interestingly, after that, there was a period of time where I think Editorial mandated across Marvel, well, softly mandated that there was going to be no more story arcs. They were going to just do single issues. That is to say, the story had to start and stop in one single issue. So yeah, that went on for a while. Yeah, about 8 issues, so like 8 months. It didn't go over well. And a lot of people don't like these single issue stories. There's like a Creature from the Black Lagoon one, the Frightful Four come back, stuff like that. I think it's a nice change of pace. Maybe just for the Fantastic Four. I think every now and again, alternating between story arcs and single issue stuff, I think it works fine. Nevertheless, yeah. So pretty much right after the final single issue like mandate from Marvel Comics, we had issue number 1. Actually, we'll step back for a second. We'll talk about issue number 100. You would think this would be a big deal. It's the 100th issue. Unfortunately, it kind of sucks. It doesn't make any sense on multiple levels. Like the beginning of it directly contradicts the ending of issue number 99. Because to my recollection, Crystal says that she's staying behind with the Inhumans because Black Bolt was sick or something. But then, like in the opening with 100, she's just with them now, and she is for a couple more issues. Yeah, it's just it doesn't make any sense. The story wise, it's basically like a team up between the Puppet Master and the Mad Thinker, and it's basically reiterated again and again. That's basically the entirety of the Puppet Master's designs here. But he's basically like demonstrating powers that he's like never been known to have. Because as you saw on the cover, it's like all their major villains are back, and they're like, "Whoa, it's Kang the Conqueror and Doctor Doom, and Namor and Dragon Man, etc." And they're like near identical to the real things, but it turns out they're androids. But somehow the Puppet Master, I don't know. I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. He's basically created essentially clones of all their villains. They're androids, but they're like perfect clones. They have like all the same strength levels and stuff like that. The Puppet Master wasn't able to do that sort of stuff. He basically was like a voodoo guy, I think, right? Voodoo doll type of thing, but it just doesn't make any sense. Whatever, dog. So like I said, issue 102, Jack Kirby's last issue, I said introduces this Namor and Magneto team up, kind of. Yeah, then John Romita Sr. takes over and finishes that off, as well as does a brief 2-issue story arc, I guess, because like I said, story arcs are back. But then here's where we get into some really complicated and surprisingly convoluted history stuff here, because then John Buscema picks up and we get this Janus storyline. Right. Because issue number 108 specifically is a little bit notorious because it's essentially a Frankenstein issue. So like I said, Jack Kirby's last issue was 102, but somehow Jack Kirby was credited with issues number 108. That's bizarre. And bizarre it was because essentially what was part of issue 108 was originally submitted to be the original issue 102, but it was rejected for some reason. Nevertheless, they decided to, like, I guess, I don't know, use the story they already paid for. Kind of. And so issue 108 is like this weird amalgamation of Stan Lee, part of Jack Kirby's original story, and then add-ons by Romita and Buscema and Lee. It's incredibly bizarre. I mean, the story-wise is nothing particularly, ultra fascinating or anything. It's about this essentially schizo guy named Janus who has an alter ego personality, I guess, called the Nega Man. And this Nega Man is something else. Anyway, right, so issue 108, because it was supposed to be issue 102, where we first saw this guy, issue 108 basically incorporates Jack Kirby's original story idea. They're like, because the story assumes that we already know who this guy is because he was supposed to show up earlier, but he never did. And so they're like doing like extensive flashbacks, which were the original unpublished issue, then supplemented with further story and art by different people. It's just bizarre. Yeah. But then they finish it off like the rest of the story arc, issues number 109 and 110, which are basically about a nihilist. Yeah, I don't know. It's just bizarre. But it doesn't end there because they basically found, like 45 plus years later, enough pages, lost pages of Jack Kirby's original story to reconstitute the thing, to recreate the original story as Jack Kirby envisioned it. And this became known as The Lost Adventure. Yeah, I think it was published in 2008. They hired Stan Lee to come back and write the dialogue for the original Jack Kirby story after they found the pages. Anyway, I feel like I've said enough in the previous volume reviews about the Lee writing and the Kirby art, so I guess I'll just briefly speak upon the Romita and Buscema art. Well, they both tried incredibly hard to, create a sense of continuity between Kirby and themselves. Apparently they thought that with Kirby leaving that no one else could replace him. They thought the book was going to be canceled until Stan Lee hired or commissioned Jack Kirby to do, John Romita to fill Kirby's place. Yeah, and the problem with it, I've seen their artwork and other things, but the problem with their initial work in the Fantastic Four is that I think they were trying too hard to emulate Kirby, and it becomes uncanny because you're trying so hard to basically copy this other guy that we've seen over 100 issues worth of art, and it's not quite right. And so for that reason, it looks a little bit uncanny. But I know Buscema comes into his own, and he does it for like 3 years. But we only obviously see the beginning of it in this volume. I guess I can talk about like intertext stuff. So what are the Fantastic Four up to? As it pertains to Reed Richards and Sue Storm, well, like I said, Invisible Girl's back on the team. Pretty epic, I guess. And they actually finally named their son. It took them like a year plus to do it. Franklin Benjamin Richards. And they also find for him some sort of guardian. Agatha Harkness, pretty much this older lady, who's also Salem Witch, the Human Torch, and Crystal. Well, basically after the Namor and Magneto storyline, Crystal leaves for good because apparently the atmosphere is, I don't know, it's pollution, and I guess her inhuman physiology can't handle it, so she leaves the team So the original four are back. And the Human Torch, Johnny Storm's very sad about this. And he's upset because he feels like none of his problems are ever taken seriously. And then there's the Thing. He's just this old wisecracking, ever-loving self. At the end here, Reed Richards comes up with the latest cure for him. And it works. He's able to transform between the Thing and Ben Grimm at will. But unfortunately, as we see at the end here in a cliffhanger, is that whatever cure Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, did to Ben Grimm, it somehow messed up his mind and he's much more sinister. Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens next. Yeah, I feel like this was more rambly than usual. Sorry about that. This was also like one take, which usually there's a lot more cutting, but whatever. Anyways, what are your thoughts? Apparently there's people who do like extensive blogs about this, which was where I was pulling some of the behind the scenes Jack Kirby, Stan Lee dynamic information from. I'll link them in the description. That's pretty cool, I guess. Anyway, well, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good one.